Pause here, my beloved child. Not because the world demanded it, but because something unseen has been moving toward you for longer than you realize. You did not stumble onto this moment by accident. You felt it first as a faint change in the air, an odd stillness after days that were already quiet. A different weight behind familiar silence. As if an invisible hand had turned a page before you were ready to read the next line. And you tried to reason it away, because you have learned how to survive by being practical. Yet your spirit kept whispering, something is shifting beneath what is not being said. You have been sensing that the connection is not gone, only buried beneath layers of restraint. Not dead. Not finished. Simply, withheld. And the strange part is, my child, you are not imagining the change. The energy has been different lately because a truth has been rising in someone who has tried, again and again, to press it back down. A truth they told themselves they could carry quietly. A truth they convinced themselves would soften if they ignored it. But some truths do not soften. They sharpen. They become heavier. They begin to press against the ribs, against the throat, against the very hands that hover over a phone at night. Somewhere, in a room you are not in, your soulmate has been standing at an emotional doorway, one foot in the past, where avoidance once felt safer, and one foot in the future, where courage demands a price. You must understand this. They have not been silent because they felt nothing. They have been silent because feeling something real made them afraid of what it would require. They told themselves they were being mature. They told themselves they were being respectful. They told themselves they were waiting for the right time. But the right time, my child, can become a disguise. Fear can put on the clothes of practicality and walk confidently through the day as if it belongs there. And now, they are reaching a threshold where silence feels heavier than honesty. You felt the distance. You felt the mixed signals. The pauses that stretched too long. The moments where you wondered if you were simply a chapter they closed without telling you. And perhaps you even asked yourself the hardest question: if they cared, wouldn't they have shown it? You tried to anchor yourself in logic. You tried to be the calm one. You tried not to become the person who begs for clarity. Yet the heart does not stop being a heart simply because the mind demands composure. My beloved child, they know what their silence has cost you. Not in theory. Not as an abstract possibility. They know now in a way that has disturbed their sleep and disrupted their sense of control. Because something happened, something small on the outside, but seismic on the inside, that made them see the story from a different angle. They discovered that part of what kept them quiet was not only their own fear. There was a hand near you, near your family, close enough to speak into the atmosphere of your life without you realizing it. A person who knew something. A person who held information like a sealed letter and never told you it existed. And your soulmate has just discovered who kept it quiet. And why? Pause. At first, the realization did not arrive like a dramatic confession. It arrived like a subtle crack in the wall of what they believed. A casual comment. An accidental mention. A name spoken without meaning to open a door. And when that name landed in the room, something in them went still. Because they recognized it. Not as a stranger. As someone connected to you, connected enough to be trusted, connected enough to be present around your life, connected enough to influence the way things unfolded. Perhaps, for a moment, they tried to deny the significance. They told themselves it was coincidence. That it didn't matter. That whatever happened between you and them was simply the natural outcome of timing and personalities and circumstance. Yet the more they sat with it, the more the pieces began to align in a way that made their stomach tighten. There had been too many strange delays. Too many moments where reaching you felt harder than it should have. Too many subtle misunderstandings that seemed to multiply without reason. My child, there are times when life tests love with distance. And there are times when love is tested by interference so quiet it never announces itself as interference. Not sabotage in the dramatic sense. Something more human, more complicated, a person who believed they were protecting you, or protecting themselves, or protecting the family's image, or protecting a version of the future they thought was best. And when your soulmate realized this, it did not give them comfort. It gave them a new kind of grief. Because it forced them to admit that while they were busy debating whether to speak, someone else had been shaping the silence. Do you understand the weight of that? The tragedy of it? Not that someone stole your story, no one can steal what is truly yours, but that valuable time was lost in a fog you never consented to breathe. And your soulmate, standing at that doorway, felt something they have tried to avoid for a long time: accountability. Not only for what happened to them, but for what happened to you. They started asking questions they had refused to ask before. They replayed old moments, scanning them like evidence. They remembered the pauses in your voice, the sudden shifts in your tone, the way you went from open to guarded, not because you became cold, but because you became tired. And for the first time, they didn't interpret your change as rejection. They interpreted it as self-protection. Because you did not stop caring. You stopped chasing. There is a difference, my beloved child, and it is holy. Your soulmate has watched you, maybe from a distance, maybe through fragments. Maybe through the quiet reports that life leaks through mutual spaces, and what unsettles them is not that you look broken. What unsettles them is that you look calmer, clearer, more contained. Like someone who has decided their peace will not be negotiated. Like someone who has learned to hold love without letting it become desperation. And that is where their inner conflict becomes unbearable. The part of them that still longs for you recognizes that your growth has made you less reachable by guilt, less available to confusion, less likely to accept half-hearted words. This is what they are facing now. You have become the kind of person who will listen, but you will not beg. You will feel, but you will not abandon yourself. You will love, but you will not lose your dignity to keep someone close. And it terrifies them. Because it means their old strategy, waiting until they felt safe, might not work anymore. It means if they come back with the same vague softness, the same almost confessions, the same incomplete truth, they may find you politely distant. Not cruel. Not vindictive. Simply done with uncertainty. And so they stand in this emotional doorway, feeling the pressure of a question that grows sharper each day. what if I waited too long? Soft breath, my child, this is the turning point. This is where fear begins to flip into urgency. Not because they suddenly became fearless, but because the cost of staying silent has become more frightening than the cost of being exposed. There is a particular kind of panic that arrives when you realize your silence has not paused the story, it has only allowed it to move forward without you. And they are beginning to see, in small flashes, a future where you build a life that does not include them. Not as punishment. Not as revenge. Simply as the natural result of you choosing stability over confusion. And that is where the jealousy comes in, not jealousy toward another person, not a dramatic obsession, not possessiveness. Something quieter. Something more revealing. They are jealous of a future version of you. A version that wakes up peaceful. A version that doesn't check their phone with hope and dread tangled together. A version that laughs freely, because your chest is no longer tight with unanswered questions. A version that is loved out loud. And they cannot stand the thought that the world might get that version of you while they remain a memory you learn to outgrow. But the story goes deeper, my beloved child, because as this urgency rises, another truth surfaces alongside it. They have discovered that someone close to your family knew more than you did. Not about every detail, not about every feeling, but enough. Enough to tilt the outcome. Enough to delay a conversation. Enough to plant doubt. Enough to keep something from reaching you when it should have. Your soulmate learned it in a way that felt almost cruelly ordinary. A conversation that wasn't meant to be a revelation. A passing remark that landed too precisely. It was the kind of moment where the room keeps moving, people keep talking, but internally everything stops. And they realized that a person you trust, someone who has a seat at the table of your life, someone who hears the family stories, someone who has been near your milestones, had been quietly holding a piece of the truth. Maybe it was a message that never got mentioned. Maybe it was an invitation that was never passed along. Maybe it was a warning spoken about them, subtle, respectable, dressed up as concern, that made you pull back without even knowing why. Maybe it was a suggestion that you should focus on other things, said at a vulnerable moment, when you were already trying to be strong. And my child, your soulmate realized that while they were wrestling with their own fear, you were being guided by information you didn't even know was filtered. This is not to make you suspicious of everyone. This is not to make you angry at your family. People are complicated. Sometimes they protect. Sometimes they control. Sometimes they confuse the two. But what matters is what this discovery does inside your soulmate. It removes one of their favorite hiding places. Because for a long time, they could blame timing. They could blame distance. They could blame circumstances. Now they must face a harder truth. There were moments when they could have fought harder for clarity. There were moments when they could have chosen courage without waiting to feel comfortable. And as that accountability rises, so does empathy. Not pity. Not self-hatred. Empathy, the ability to feel what you might have felt. They imagine you in your quiet moments, my beloved child. They imagine you reading between the lines of silence, trying to decide whether to hope or to let go. They imagine you second-guessing your own intuition, asking yourself if you were too much for wanting honesty, if you were too sensitive for feeling the absence. They imagine you sitting with the ache of not knowing where you stand, and the subtle humiliation of having to pretend you are fine when the truth is you were simply tired of being brave alone. This is what wakes them up at night. Not a dramatic fear of losing you to someone else, but the shame of realizing they allowed you to suffer in a fog they helped create. And then, like a key turning in a lock, a specific memory returns. Not a grand romantic scene. Not a perfect cinematic kiss. Something smaller. More real. The kind of moment that only becomes profound when you realize what it contained. They remember a day, maybe you don't even remember it the same way, when you offered them something simple, a look that said, "You can be honest with me." A pause in conversation where you didn't rush them. A gentle question. A small kindness. A laugh shared without effort. The way you listened without trying to win. The way your presence felt like a quiet room after a loud week. And what stuns them is not the memory itself. It's what they see inside it now. You were offering them a safe place to be real. You were offering them sincerity. And they didn't take it. Because they were still trying to appear composed. Still trying to keep the upper hand. Still trying to avoid vulnerability as if vulnerability were a trap instead of a bridge. My beloved child, this is where timing and fear reveal themselves. They begin to understand that what they called waiting for the right moment was often fear. Fear of being rejected. Fear of being exposed. Fear of not knowing what to do if you said yes. Fear of being responsible for the happiness they secretly wanted with you. Fear of being seen clearly, because being seen clearly means you cannot hide behind ambiguity. And this is the bitter lesson they are learning: love demands courage before certainty. Not after. Not when it's convenient. Not when every variable is controlled. Before. Because if you wait until you are guaranteed safety, you will often arrive after the door has already closed. Yet, my child, their feelings did not disappear. Distance did not reduce it. Silence did not dissolve it. If anything, the space exposed the truth by removing the distractions. When they could no longer rely on casual contact, on surface-level interaction, on the illusion that, there's always later, they were forced to sit with what remained. And what remained was you. Not in an obsessive way. In a persistent way. Like a note that keeps playing beneath the noise of life. Like a question the heart refuses to stop asking. They have tried to move on in the ways people attempt to move on. Keeping busy, focusing on goals, filling calendars, laughing in rooms that feel strangely hollow afterward. They have tried to convince themselves that if they do not speak your name, the longing will shrink. But longing is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet and constant. Sometimes it waits patiently until the night brings your memory back with the gentleness of a wave. And now, with this new discovery about someone close to your family, everything inside them rearranges. Because it suggests that what happened was not only a result of their hesitations, but also of a narrative that was shaped around you without your full awareness. So they begin to rehearse. They rehearse what they would say if they finally stopped hiding. They imagine the conversation in 100 versions. They picture your face, your eyes, your silence. They anticipate your questions, because they know you will not settle for vague apologies. They know you have outgrown empty words. They practice the beginning. They practice the middle. They practice the moment where they admit they were afraid. And then they practice the hardest part, the part where they do not blame anyone else. Because accountability, my beloved child, is not, I didn't speak because someone interfered. Accountability is, even with interference, I should have fought for truth sooner. They are beginning to understand something you already know: words aren't enough. Words without action are just sound. And they can feel that you, quiet as you have been, are not waiting for sound. You are waiting for consistency. You are waiting for courage that holds its shape past midnight, past longing, past temporary emotion. So let this be a truth you remember: you are not here to chase love. You are here to discern it. You are here to meet it when it arrives with integrity. You are here to protect your peace as if it is sacred, because it is. If they come to you with excuses dressed as poetry, you will feel it. If they come to you with confession but no follow-through, you will sense the fracture. And you will not be cruel, you will simply be clear. Because you have learned that clarity is kinder than prolonged confusion. And still, my beloved child, something has triggered urgency in them beyond emotion. Not just jealousy. Not just longing. Something practical, sobering, undeniable: the realization that life changes fast. That people move. That families shift. That circumstances alter without warning. That a single decision can redirect a path permanently. It may have been a reminder from their own life. A sudden loss, a friend's engagement, a parent's illness, a move, an ending they didn't expect. Something that made them feel time in their bones. And in that sobering awareness, they thought of you. Not as someone waiting in place. As someone evolving. They imagined you stepping fully into your next chapter: new routines, new friendships, new peace, perhaps even new love one day, if it is right and steady and real. And the thought did something to them. It did not make them angry. It made them honest. Because they realized they do not fear another person. They fear irrelevance. They fear becoming a lesson you learned instead of a love you lived. They fear being the almost story you tell yourself not to revisit. They fear that by the time they finally speak, you will be too emotionally free to be pulled back into uncertainty. This is why the discovery about the person close to your family matters so much. Because it adds a new layer. It shows them that silence can be engineered, not always maliciously, but effectively. That other people can slow down truth. That narratives can be curated. That, for your own good, can become a prison if you never consented to the bars. And once they saw that, they began to see something else. They began to see you. Not the version of you that was trying to understand them. The version of you that is now protecting yourself. They realized you have stopped offering your heart to confusion. That you have stopped making excuses for inconsistency. That you have started to treat your emotional world like a home, one that does not let strangers wander in and out, leaving the door open behind them. And they understand, if they want to be part of your life, they cannot arrive like a shadow. They must arrive like a choice. A clear one. A costly one. A real one. Somewhere in the quiet of their private life, when no one was watching, they broke in a way they have not allowed themselves to break. Not falling apart dramatically. Just unraveling. Sitting alone, staring at nothing. Feeling the weight of all the moments they could have been braver. Feeling the shame of how easily fear convinced them to postpone the truth. Feeling the sadness of knowing you might have cried and then wiped your face and gone on with your day, while they told themselves everything was fine. They replayed the story from your perspective. They pictured you hearing half-truths. They pictured you sensing distance without understanding its cause. They pictured you being influenced by someone close to your family, someone whose words landed with authority because of proximity and trust. They pictured you choosing peace, not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped wanting to be the only one who cared out loud. And in that private breakdown, my beloved child, they made a quiet promise to themselves: if there is still time, I will not waste it. Not with another vague check-in. Not with another breadcrumb. Not with another moment that leaves you wondering. But a real conversation. A real admission. A real decision. And so we arrive at the scene you have felt approaching, the near-message moment, the one that has happened more times than you know. The phone in their hand. Your name in their contacts like a doorway they have been afraid to open. The cursor blinking like a heartbeat. The silence in the room so thick it feels like it has substance. They have typed before, my child. They have started messages and erased them. They have written something honest and then panicked and replaced it with something safe. They have hovered over the call button and put the phone down like it was too hot. They have told themselves, tomorrow. Later. When I can say it better. And tomorrow became weeks. Weeks became months. The unsent truth became a quiet burden they carried like a hidden wound. But this time is different. This time, the discovery has changed the stakes. Because now they know that part of the silence was shaped by someone near your family, someone who had a reason. And your soulmate has begun to understand the reason in a way that unsettles them. Not a villain's reason. A human reason. The kind of reason that hides behind concern and still causes damage. It may have been fear of you leaving the familiar path. It may have been protectiveness that crossed into control. It may have been unresolved history. Someone projecting their own heartbreak onto your choices. It may have been a quiet bias. A preference, a belief about who is right for you. It may have been that they saw your softness and mistook it for weakness, and thought they could steer your life without your permission. And when your soulmate learned who it was, something inside them hardened, not into cruelty, but into resolve. Because they realized, if other voices have been shaping your understanding, then truth must be spoken plainly. Not through hints. Not through third parties. Not through assumptions. spoken to you directly, respectfully, without demanding anything in return. Still, my beloved child, do not mistake urgency for entitlement. Urgency can be pure, and yet still must honor your boundaries. If they come to you now, it must not be with the energy of, "I need you to fix this for me." It must be with the energy of, "I am here to own what I did, to tell you what I learned, and to let you choose." Because love that pressures is not love. Love that manipulates is not love. Love that honors your freedom, this is love with a spine. And your soulmate is beginning to understand that if they want to step into your life again, it must be with a spine. With maturity. With patience. With the willingness to rebuild trust as if it is earned brick by brick, not demanded with emotion. So there they are. A quiet room. Curtains barely drawn back. The light from the phone reflecting in tired eyes. The world outside continuing as if nothing sacred is happening. And inside, a storm contained in a single decision. They open your name. And suddenly, all the rehearsals evaporate. Because no imagined version can fully prepare you for the reality of reaching someone you might have lost. Their hand feels heavier than it should. Their breath becomes measured. They stare at the blank message field, and they can feel how many outcomes exist on the other side of one honest sentence. Perhaps you will respond. Perhaps you will not. Perhaps you will be kind but distant. Perhaps you will be angry. Perhaps you will ask questions they cannot answer neatly. Perhaps you will say, "Why now?" And that question, my child, is the one they fear the most, because there is no answer that sounds beautiful. The truth is not beautiful. The truth is simple: fear delayed them. Confusion distracted them. Other voices interfered. And your growth continued without waiting for their readiness. They swallow. They begin to type. And before they type, they see you, in the way the heart sees someone when it is finally honest. Not as an idea. Not as a fantasy. As a person with a nervous system, with limits, with memories, with dignity. They remember that you are not a destination. You are a life. And entering your life requires reverence. So they do not start with poetry. They do not start with charm. They do not start with a casual greeting designed to test the waters. They start with something real. Something that risks everything. Because they have reached the point where silence feels heavier than honesty. And my beloved child, there is one more layer you must hold gently. Even if they speak, you are not required to abandon your peace. Even if they confess, you are not required to forget the cost of their absence. Even if they reveal who kept something quiet and why, you are not required to make yourself small so the story can be convenient. You can listen without surrendering. You can be compassionate without being available to confusion again. You can forgive without rewriting your boundaries. You can feel love and still demand integrity. That is your power now. And perhaps that is why this moment has come only after you became stronger. Because the version of you who would have accepted crumbs is not the version of you being addressed now. The you that exists now can handle truth without collapsing into longing. The you that exists now can hear a confession and still ask, what will you do differently? Because you have learned something sacred, your heart is not a place for experiments. So as their fingers hover, as the cursor blinks, as the room holds its breath with them, they remember the memory again, the small moment where you offered them sincerity. They realize that what you offered then is what they must offer now, honesty without games. Presence without performance. A willingness to be seen, even if being seen means being judged fairly. They think about the person close to your family who kept something quiet. They think about the reason. They think about how quietly power can be wielded in intimate spaces. And they decide that they will not fight shadows with more shadows. They will bring the truth into the light. Not to create drama. Not to turn you against anyone. But to set you free from confusion. To let you finally understand why certain moments felt off. Why certain doors seemed to close without you touching them. Why you felt resistance you couldn't name. And then, my child, with a steadiness that surprises even them, they let their thumb press lightly against the screen as if it is the first real step they have taken in months. They type. They pause. They delete a word, then retype it more honestly. They stare at what they have written, and their chest tightens. Not because it is wrong, but because it is true. They know that once this message is sent, they cannot return to the comfort of ambiguity. They cannot pretend they didn't feel. They cannot hide behind maybe. They cannot claim they were just being careful. They will have chosen a path. And paths have consequences. So they sit with it for a moment longer, listening to the silence they used to hide inside. Only now, the silence does not feel like protection. It feels like a coffin for words that should have lived. Their finger hovers over send. And the first sentence they typed was not what anyone would expect.